o'clock on Tuesday, January 21st. I'm going to call to order the Winooski City Council. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Councilor Jim Duncan.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next up is agenda review. Are there any questions or concerns about the agenda as it is? Anything from the public? We will then move to public comment. So this is a chance for members of the public who want to speak on anything that is not included in the agenda to do so. Is there any public comment today? All right. We will move to our consent agenda then. We have two items for approval. We have the City Council minutes from January 13th meeting and warrant ending January 16 and payroll warrant December 29 to January 11. Any questions or concerns about the consent agenda? Then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items, the City Council minutes and the warrant ending 1/16/20 and payroll warrant 12/29 to 1/11.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Amy, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is council reports. Can I start with you, Mike?
Sure. I attended the airport commission meeting last Wednesday, and they went over quite a bit of stuff. I got the highlights, which I won't bore all the details with you, but I'd like to thank the Burlington International Airport Commission and the Director of Aviation, Mr. Gene Richards, and his team for having us attend that meeting. It was very enlightful. There was a couple things that they discussed, some of the financing and the revenues that they're bringing in to renting out pretty much all their space. And they discussed their master plan, which is required every 7 to 10 years to be updated by the FAA. They did a construction update, which a hotel is scheduled to start construction in the spring, barring any delays. The quick note that the airport turns 100 years old this August. They decided August 14th, 1920 would be the official birthday of the airport, since it was the first day that a plane landed at the airport, which is kind of cool. There is going to be some videos, some literature, and the airport is pretty much documented all over the airport of the history of the airport. It's pretty cool to see, so if you're there, check it out. The commission did express an interest of having a commission meeting at the airbase and at Beta Technologies, which is an aerospace company at the airport. And they're doing a possible luncheon for the 100-year celebration, but they don't have a date set yet, so stay tuned for that. The airport commission had some questions for the Winooski City Council on why we want a seat at the commission. Vice Chair Bill Keyhole had made a motion to discuss about a work session with the City Council that will be scheduled at the March commission meeting. So I think they're going to discuss possible having a work session with us, and the council is invited, but primarily I believe it's going to be the mayor and city manager at the table discussing it. But the rest of us are invited to listen to hear. So stay tuned for that email. I'm sure they'll be getting a hold of us. Their February meeting, they're going to be discussing their master plan and approving it. So they wanted to table that until the March meeting for us. I believe that's a step closer for Winooski getting a seat at the commission at the table, which is very good news since we've been trying to do it for several years now. Gene Richards has deeply expressed his desire to see Winooski on this commission. He stated how wonderful are the people that are in our city, especially in the city hall and our city government. He says the relationship with the airport and the city of Winooski has been just wonderful, quote unquote. He believes that Winooski has been very professional and very honest in all its conversations in all working matters that affect our community and the airport, from the present council and city manager to the past, and the past for nearly a decade. This made me very proud to hear about our little city and my fellow Winooskians. I think that's a great job and great representation on how we do business here. And that's all I have. I do have some literature if you guys are interested in looking at it after, but that's all I got.
Amy?
I attended the downtown Winooski meeting last week. They are still working on their bylaws and hope to be sending that to a lawyer soon for review. And they also spent the meeting discussing their goals for 2020. So things like recruiting new board members and setting a fundraising goal.
Since our last meeting, I attended the Finance Commission and the Safe, Healthy, Connected People Commission. The Finance Commission dug into the big picture of revenue and expense, so similar things that we have been seeing here in the budget process. If residents are interested in that, it's available online on the website under the agendas area, as well as was posted in Front Porch Forum. And Safe, Healthy, Connected Commission discussed the pool programming and pricing that's tentatively proposed, which we saw at our recent meeting as well, and are open to receiving feedback on that. I also was invited to attend some culture and community presentations at the high school. So some students were sharing, they had been studying equity, bias, power, and privilege, and so they were presenting on that. And there's a little bit of, it's part of some projects they're doing that tie into things that they would like to see in the community. So they've been inviting community leaders to see those presentations, and we'll probably have more details in the future.
Since the last council meeting, I was able to attend the family disco at the school, which was an awesome event. I did not know what to expect and was really happily surprised, and got some good dancing in, lots of glow sticks and popcorn and snow cones. So fantastic job from the school for doing that. And then I was able to volunteer at the Winooski Food Shelf this Monday as part of the MLK Day of Service. I want to thank the city for organizing that and putting that together. I know you were making cards as well, but just great to check in on the food shelf, serving over 700 people in our community each year. And they got all new shelving, completely reorganized their food distribution center, and are definitely interested in more volunteering coming up in their Saturday and Wednesday distributions. So it's great to get into that space and see what they're doing there.
Thank you. City updates.
Great. I just have a few updates tonight. Want to echo, wonder if you want to pay attention to that. Flashing lights. Echo Jim's thanks to the community services team, especially Olivia Miller, for organizing the Martin Luther King Day of Service. It was a great success, and thank you to the counselors and the community who came out for that. Want to provide a quick update. In past years, we have provided a gentrification report in January. We will be providing that in March with the housing, next housing update. So more to come on that. Also wanted to let you know that our wayfinding consultant, Landworks, wayfinding is signage and how we navigate around the public space together. We'll be presenting the signage alternatives for community input on February 10th from 6 to 8 here at City Hall, and all are welcome to provide feedback to that. Again, it's February 10th at 6 o'clock here in City Hall. As part of our form-based code, we'll be having our project review committee meeting on the redevelopment of 223 East Allen Street on January 30th. It's part of our administrative approval process, but it is an open meeting if anyone would like to come. Again, it's the redevelopment of 223 East Allen Street. We also anticipate that being on your agenda for next week's meeting. The developers are looking for low-income tax credit. They are submitting an application for low-income tax credits for that project, since it is very similar to Castlevant, a mixed income housing development, including permanently affordable housing. So they will be looking for a letter of support from you. So you'll see them at your meeting next week. Want to just flag an issue, more to come in the future. We understand that the rail is looking to upgrade the crossing at Mallett's Bay Avenue. So Public Works and I have a meeting with them this Thursday to talk about what that looks like, what the disruption will be, what the plan will be. So much more to come in the future, but just want to put that on your radar screen Obviously, that's no cost to us, but will definitely impact our community. And then finally, we had a 7 a.m. this morning, way too early for me, Regional Dispatch Board meeting. So as you know, we've been talking about standing up the Chittenden County Public Safety Authority for many years, and the voters approved it at the 2018 town meeting day. We received the final report from the consultant this morning. That is up on the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission website, linked off of our website if folks are interested. And then the board had a very, I think, productive conversation about next steps. The costs are coming in very high to do the full implementation that the consultant is recommending. So the board is really looking at ways to minimize some costs. That's also driven by the fact that Milton, who has voted to go in, has opted out at this point, and Williston, who had previously suggested they would go all in, is looking to retain the free service they currently get from the state police. So it changes the expenditure, how many communities are covering that expenditure cost. So we have started talking about interim solution where we locate, originally the new dispatch center was going to be in South Burlington at their public safety building. Burlington believes they have enough space in their current dispatch center to upsize it and hold the dispatchers we need to operate the communities that are currently in. It would still be operated as Chittenden County Public Safety Authority, not as the City of Burlington, but would save significantly on the capital costs. So we are going to look down that road for the next couple of months and see if there's a solution to be had there. And obviously, there'll be a number of decision points for you all to consider along the way. But since this just happened this morning, I want to provide you that update as well. That's all I've got.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our regular items. Our first item A is the annual FY19 audit presentation with Angela.
You guys can come on up. Come right up here.
I'll bring my own chair.
So just by way of introduction, as you know, we bid out our external auditing services this year, and R. Smith and Company were the low bidders, the respondents, had a history with and experience in TIF audits as well, partially why we selected them. So they spent a lot of time with us over the last 6 months or so, and the hard copy of the audit is at your tables, but they are here to present the high level of it as well.
Thank you. My name is Josh Quinn. This is Ron Smith of RHR Smith. So what we usually do is we'll walk through kind of the major statements, schedules, point out a couple things as far as fund balances and kind of how the state of your city looks from a financial perspective. So I don't know if you have them on your computers or going to use the hard copies. I will basically start referencing statements and page numbers, and we can flip around. It's going to be somewhat in page order as best we can. So the first pages all the way up through kind of 17 are the MB&As. That's the management discussion and analysis, which is actually what Angela does, and she puts that together separate from us. So you can read through that. That's kind of Angela's perspective on where the city stands and kind of explanations for various things that are found within the audit. First thing I'm going to point to is Statement C, which is on page 17. This is your governmental fund balance sheet. And so this lists all of your major funds and then collects all of your non-major funds into one column. So the general fund is your general operating expenses. And so this is your assets, your liabilities, your deferred inflows. The real thing everybody looks at on this page is the unassigned fund balance, which is down at the bottom. And you guys have some $124,000. When we talk about unassigned fund balances, one of the metrics we use is 30, 60, and 90 days of operating activity. Your budget is around $6.7 million. So that gives you about $550,000, $560,000 for 30 days, and then 60 at 1.1, and then 90 would be that 1.7. We usually recommend around the 60, but we definitely see municipalities that have days worth. So you guys have about 45 days, which is in pretty good shape as compared to a lot of the places that we go.
And 45 days is the current policy for the city.
So the next one is Statement E, which is page 19. And holler questions out. A lot of this is very dry, so please don't, feel free to interrupt. So Statement E, so that's your statement of revenues and expenditures. This is actually all the revenues that you brought in, all the expenditures. Again, it lists all your major funds, just like the previous statement. Your total revenues that you brought in, $7 million, a little more than. Your total expenditures were $680,000. You did have transfers out, so those are separated out of your general revenue and expenditures, transfers in and out, and most of your transfers went into the city capital reserve fund, and that was that $659,000 of that $672 in the transfer out. So you can see for the year, you operated basically with those transfers taken into account in a deficit of $387,000. So that reduced your fund balance from the prior year of $1.85 million to $1.681. And that's total all-inclusive, not just unassigned fund balance.
And a lot of that was things that were brought to council to spend out of prior year reserves.
Next one is going to be Statement G, that's page 21. So these are your three major proprietary funds, that's water, sewer, and parking. This is your balance sheet, all three of these funds. So this is a little different because this talks about net position as opposed to just straight fund balances. And these funds are also in very good, so the total net position and unrestricted, they're all in the black, which is great. So those funds are in good shape. Statement H, which is page 22, that's just like previously, that's your revenues and expenses for the year in those funds. Next thing's gonna be debt schedule. That's gonna be page 49. So this is basically summary of all the debt that the city has. This is bonds, notes payable, capital leases. Shows you what you've added, shows you what you've reduced, and then your ending balance, as well as what can be expected to be paid in the current year that you're in right now. Breaks it up by governmental as well as business type activities. Those business activities are your water, sewer, and your parking funds. So those have their own separate debt issuances as well.
There's a state cap on what your debt service is, and that's a question we get a lot. Where are you? I think for a city of your size, and you're a busy municipality, you're well, not even close to any statutory concerns as far as what your debt limit is. Nowhere near it. So yeah.
If you wanted more information on what that debt all was exactly, page 44 through 49 lists out every single piece of debt you have and all the balances that are there. So you can look into all those. A lot of those are TIF-related pieces. The next thing we usually get asked about is net position and then fund balance detail. So that's page 51. So if you look at your fund balances, there's restricted, committed, assigned, and then unassigned. So 51, page 51, and the next couple of pages detail out in your general fund, for example, what is your non-spendable fund balance. So non-spendable is typically prepaid expenses as well as inventory, and so it comes to that same number that you could refer back to on Statement C. It talks about what your committed funds are, what your assigned fund balances are, stuff of that sort as well. So that's just a little more information if you wanted to dive deeper and figure out what those how those big numbers are broken down into pieces and parts. All right, next one. Schedule 1 is page 66. That's your revenue and expenditures. This is budget versus actual. So you can look here to see if there's any major areas where you were above or below budget of concern. There's really nothing major in here except for the capital program, which I think is stuff that was probably brought to the
Those were
councils.
reserve assignments council approved, yeah.
Yep. And then Schedule A and Schedule C, which are 71 and 74, these are basically similar tables that list all of your actual special revenue funds. Some of them are non-major, so we don't put them in the front couple pages. These are just small ones, so like the Community Center Fund, the Justice Center Fund. Those are just a whole separate list of balance sheet and then revenues and expenditures, so you can see what activity actually occurred in those funds through the year if you're interested. So overall, one of the things that we do, so we come through and we do a bunch of testing in your systems to get an idea of the internal controls that Angela has set up and that you guys operate on, and then we test to see how those things are working. And then we provide a management letter that says, okay, here are some things that we found that we would recommend that you look into. So for this year, and a lot of this year is kind of get to know you year, just because it's you have a lot of activity going on, and you're while a small city, you have a lot of stuff going on. So bank reconciliations were the ones that we kind of focused on, and just getting some reviews and really just verifying that people are reviewing them after they're being done. Really just to try to set up the best possible controls to say if something happened, we can all sit around the table and say, yep, we're all doing the best job, the industry best practices, and sometimes things just happen. So bank reconciliations, there's some outdated, some old outstanding checks that we talked about, and so there's a process where you actually submit those to the state, to the Unclaimed Property Division, and Angela's working on that procedure and process because that's just one that's not in place at the moment. And there was one other.
Where's the credit card processing or bank statement reconciliation? Was that under the first?
That was the first one, yeah. I have it here somewhere.
W-2s?
I think so. Outstanding checks. There was timeliness. There was two that were. We found a couple that were just not timely. I think one of those, one of the things that you've done, I think this year, was hire some help for Angela, and that's fantastic. And I think that that's going to allow her to do a lot of, step back from some of that day-to-day operations thing and actually kind of look at a more broad view for you guys. So that's great. I will say that it's been a pleasure working with Angela. She is one of the best finance officers I've worked with in the state, and I do a lot, both school districts as well as municipalities. So I think you guys are in very good hands and lucky to have her.
That's good to hear. Thank you. So, Angela, you got an A+, all right?
So I'll open up if you have any questions.
Sounds like the high level summary is all's well. Am I missing?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on, and I think that to say it better, I think that your government does a lot with a little. Really is the best way to say it. So some of the conversations don't always roll this way, and so I think that that's not the case for Winooski. You ought to be proud of what you have. So this is a busy place for sure. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that reflects what we hear a lot here. We don't have a super large staff, but we do have a lot of stuff going on, and we're trying to provide a lot of services to our residents.
And really, to put it in perspective, all we do is government and nonprofit work. And rarely do we walk into a situation where you actually do your own financial statements and hand them to us to audit. And Winooski is definitely the exception for that. And I would say maybe less than 30% of our clientele actually give us the information the way you deliver it to us this year. And that's a pretty good compliment that Josh paid, your finance officer for sure.
I wasn't actually sure what to do when she first handed it to me. I got a call and I was just like, what am I supposed to do?
Not used to this.
This is different.
Well, I want to make sure that we know what's in our books and that we're reporting things the way that we know them. While I trust the auditors are doing their job, we have intricacies in our revenues where I know that this is really a community service thing and that's how it should be classified. So I want to make sure that we're reporting what we're actually doing.
Also, I'm very impressed with your work. Typically, hearing it from some professionals as well is excellent. Are there any questions from council?
I think it's great that we're going to be an example at their next meeting.
We've been given our marching orders what to say.
Well, thank you for taking the time to work with us and give us this, secondary confirmation that we do have things in order here, and thanks for taking the time to walk us through that as well.
Look forward
It's
to
our
it.
pleasure.
And thank you,
Thank you.
Angela.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Angela.
Oh, do we need a motion for approval on this, actually?
No, you just need to receive it.
Okay. It has been received. So we can move on to item B, which is an event permit application for Wildcrats Critter Crawl.
Critter call.
Good evening. So as you said, I've been bringing Amy Zielinski up with me from Vermont PBS. Our staff received an event permit application for the first Wild Kratts Critter Crawl, which is a mouthful. It's a family-friendly event featuring educational activities, a short walking parade, games, food trucks, and live music. The event will start at 10 a.m. on the sidewalk and grassy area on Winooski Falls Way in front of the Champlain Mill, to be followed by a single parade crossing at noon to Rotary Park, which is the Critter Crawl itself. And the event will conclude at 3 p.m. Event sponsors have also requested Sunday, May 31st as a rain date, so this is to be held on Saturday, May 30th. The event sponsor met with the event review team on Wednesday, January 15th to discuss the logistics, and we're excited to welcome Vermont PBS's first event here. So if you have questions about the specifics of a critter crawl, I'm not an expert on that, but Amy apparently is, so.
I actually would love if you wanted to share a brief summary of what it is.
So yeah, we wanted to figure out a way to sort of celebrate our programming and do our first big event, hopefully to become a yearly event at our new hometown here in the city of Winooski. And Wild Kratts is one of the most popular programs on the air, so we thought, you know, Wild Kratts are all about animals and critters, so the Critter Crawl idea was born. And so, you know, we're going to invite kids to dress up as their favorite critter, or else come and we'll help them create their own costume or embellish their costume. And then we'll have the short parade, as we mentioned, and then the real celebration will take place in the circle. We'll invite our other nonprofit partners. We've been speaking to Let's Grow Kids and Echo and Flynn about coming and, you know, having educational activities for the kids. And then we're talking with Mr. Chris about performing in a circle and maybe some other fun things, but food, restrooms, you know, kind of keeping everybody sort of in that area for an hour or two, and yeah.
Sounds good. And we are happy to have Vermont PBS here now, and it's exciting that you're bringing, you know, an event like this to sort of kick off a presence here when the weather gets a little bit better. Are there any questions from council?
I have one.
Yeah.
Are you confident you'll have enough volunteers for security and for crossing guards? When you talk about children, it's a busy area down there, so.
Yes, and that's a big concern, and it was when I presented to all the department heads. We did talk about that, about, you know, just really gathering as many people as possible to help us during that crossing, and the town is going to help with securing the circle, so that once you're in the circle, you'll be staying there, you know, and safely. But again, that crossing is just going to be happening that one time in mass. But yeah, we want to, you know, again, security of the children is of utmost importance to us, and if people want to volunteer, I'll send you my email address, but yeah, we're always open for more help.
Okay.
But
Is the city gonna offer any police presence at this event too?
So one of the things during the event review committee meeting is that the chief did offer to shut down the rotary for that crossing. We believe we can do that with staff on hand. We don't need to staff up for that, but there will be a police car there if that's
In the area,
of
just,
interest to the event organizers.
okay.
And again, we're not expecting a huge turnout. I mean, of course, you know, probably at most maybe 200 or so people. If there's more, great. But you know, we hope this first year will give us a chance to really get our feet wet. You know, really, you know, dial in the event, and then hopefully it'll just continue to grow.
Anything else?
I'm excited about it. Thank you for
Yes,
proposing it.
it sounds wonderful.
So I would entertain a motion to approve the event permit application for Wild Kratts Critter Crawl.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with it.
Thank you. I'll be in touch.
Thank you, Amy.
So we will move now to item C, FY21 proposed budget discussion.
Can you push the power button?
It went to
Thank
sleep.
you. It went to sleep. Sorry. Thanks for being So, this is really your night to talk about the budget and what you've heard over the last month and a half. We have put together a pretty quick presentation. I've included some just kind of data slides in here if you want to refer to reserve balances or tax rate history or whatnot. But what's in here is a very high level overview of what's before you, as well as the information that you requested during the process that we haven't gotten to in different department presentations. So if you don't mind, I will just click through this pretty quickly, and then really the floor is yours to provide us any guidance. At next Monday's meeting, you will need to approve the amount to be raised by property taxes and warrant and approve the warning for town meeting day. So this, just as a reminder, this is what's before you. It's a total general fund budget of $7.6 million with 5.9 to be raised from property taxes. It represents a 2.45% increase from last year. About a little over half of that is for pool operations, and for a home assessed at $225,000, that equals $15.55 a quarter, or $62 for the year. That's usually what we use for the current average assessed home in Winooski. We have presented this in a new way for you tonight. So what we've included here, and Angela can go into details, is the things that have significantly changed from last year's budget, what fund they sit in, and what the tax rate impact is for those things. So for example, the first line there is overall COLA and STEP increases, and the budgetary impact that has had. I do want to note that the numbers in parentheses, traditionally reflecting negative numbers, are actually revenue lines. So that is a negative to the amount of new property taxes we need to raise. And then the lines that are highlighted have both expenditure and revenue offset. So there's a net tax rate impact. So what you see here is salaries, benefits, the CIP annual 5% escalator, changes to professional services contracts, other changes in costs where we've kind of adjusted lines to reflect actual expenditures in past year, the pool offsets, what we expect in grand list growth, and other revenues we are projecting to increase.
I just want to say this, I found this really helpful, this new sort of visualization.
Yeah. And
Same,
should
as I
give
requested it, thank you.
I should
I
give the
appreciate
credit
it.
to Councillor Lafayette for kind of putting this idea out there and guiding us through what would be most helpful.
Yeah.
So on this slide is really what we consider level service increases. So if we are going to continue operations as we currently are, this is what is included in those changes.
Well, and I do want to point out that that total there at the bottom is actually less than just salaries and COLA to keep up with our staff as it is. So I think this reflects a lot of hard work in, you know, what we've been discussing about trying to find other revenues and be smarter about that.
Thank you. And then on this slide is the things that we are proposing to add or adjust. So that includes the CCTV additional contribution, the moving the HR manager to 40 hours a week, both in expenditures and internal transfers, setting aside some funds for a future finance and data management system, the additional election officer at the polls, the elimination of the lease cost for community services, an additional $1,000 for the Winooski Valley Parks District, additional shift a week of per diem fire coverage, the community risk reduction intern, and then the equipment operator one for both pool operations and maintenance and other maintenance during the non-pool months. So we can go back to these during your discussion, absolutely.
That was my thought.
So always want to call out what's not in here. So regional dispatch, we will be bringing you much, as I said earlier, much more about that. Funding to replace the JAG funding we are currently not able to access because of our fair and impartial policing policy. And any funds to expand the community liaison program at the school to city services and the equity council, but we have submitted the Working Communities Challenge Grant for that, directed at that. I want to give some high-level overview pictures, and again, these data points are in your budget book and linked online under city budget as well if folks are interested. So this is just the general fund breakdown. On the left side, you see the revenue breakdown. So 83% of general fund revenue comes from property tax payments. The balance is from other fees and fines, intergovernment transfers, charges for service, etc. And then on the right side is the expenditure breakdown. So solely of the general fund, the biggest expenditure is the police department at 34%. And then you see how it's broken down otherwise. However, if you look across the entire fund budget, so water fund, wastewater fund, parking fund, etc., that shifts. So here you see the total expenditure breakdown by fund for the $15 million proposed budget for FY21, and then you see where where those dollars are going by service area. So when you add in all of the funds, Public Works becomes our biggest expenditure at 30% of the overall budget, followed by paying TIF debt, which is very exciting to pay debt, and then 18% for the police, and you see how it goes from there. So this is what is in this proposed FY21 budget. During the, so now I'm moving into, so that was the kind of overall budget. Now I'm moving into the information you requested that hasn't yet been presented to you. So first, you had some questions about the tax increment financing district budget and different models and scenarios as we wrap up the TIF debt by 2024. So this is the budget as it's currently presented to you. You'll see in the bottom right-hand corner the red circle of 1.4. This is what Angela and I pay a lot of attention to. We are obligated to keep that number above 1.0 to meet our it's our debt service coverage ratio. We have to have that number above 1.0 to meet the terms of our debt. So this budget obviously does that. When Angela and I are building this budget, we look at this is a 20-year budget, so we always look at what the assumptions we're making now will impact, how they will impact the final payout in 2024. So what we've done on the next 3 slides is presented you 3 different scenarios, kind of a best case, a probable case, and a worst case. There are many, many variables behind this spreadsheet, so we can play with those more if you would like. But we want to give you had asked for some scenarios, so we want to respond to that. So this first scenario is, you see the assumptions there on the left. So this is the global settlement we had previously with the debt holders on Spinner. There's a final payout remaining on that agreement. So this is assuming we get that final payout. We sell and redevelop 17 Abenaki Way, which is 7D. We are modeling a $7 million assessed value of that development project. And for this model, that is low, that is very conservative, but again, we're trying to be conservative in these numbers. This includes a 0.5 cent tax rate increase for FY22, 23, and 24. So again, trying to be conservative in that. Continuing the general fund transfer, what's in this is the projected education tax rate increases that are part of the school bond. So I think that's what initially triggered the request for these different scenarios. This does include full payment of the TD and PCOR notes, the 2 primary, or the TD note, which is our primary note, and the PCOR note. This model also does include full repayment of the CDC note. So with all of those assumptions baked in, you see on the right-hand side, we continue to meet our 1-to-1 debt service coverage ratio for the life of the TIF, and we have a balance of $600,000 at the end of the TIF. And we have the repayment of the CDC note. This is a very good picture for us. The second scenario we've outlined is no final payment on the global settlement. That deadline passes and we let that go. It does include the redevelopment of 7D. It includes city and school tax rates at only 0.5% for the out year, so a much more conservative tax rate estimation. continued general fund transfer, full payment of the TD and P-Core note, and only half repayment of our CDC note. With half repayment of our CDC note, we can continue all of the operations we're currently funding with the CDC note. So this is, I think, I still think scenario 1 is going to happen, but if we're being very, very conservative, this is a more conservative estimate. And you see we're still above 1-to-1, and we have 260,000 in surplus at the end. And then, there's something else I was... This also, I need to know, assumes no other growth or development of assessed values in the TIF district. So for example, if a hotel or something else happens on East Allen Street, that's not built into this model. Higher assessment at 70 Main with Four Quarters expansion is not built into this model. So we're, again, being conservative and not only assuming growth at 70. And then our worst case scenario, which doesn't work, is no global settlement payment, no sale or redevelopment of Abenaki Way. Essentially nothing else happens in the TIF district for the next 4 years. The 0.5% city and school tax rate, full payment of TD and the P-Core notes, which we are committed to, and the forgiveness of 560,000 of repayment to the CDC. Still lets us maintain the operations we are doing with the CDC note now. The problem with this is we start not meeting our 1-to-1 in FY22, and we are in deficit by $500,000 by the end of the TIF. Hence why we are working very hard to make 7D happen. Is that clear? Okay, I'm gonna keep going, but come back to any of this. So you had also asked for, so this is our community development fund budget that is before you. This is the, during this process, you will stand up, you will meet as the Winooski Community Development Corporation Trust, receive the funds from the TIF district, allocate those back to the city, and this is how we would propose to use those funds. Again, this budget is, primarily pays for Heather's time, part of Paul's time, some grant matches, some printing costs for development materials, etc. We are carrying a fund balance in this fund with the hopes of using that to potentially buy down some community development projects in the future. This is the overall budget that's before you. And then you asked us about what's in the dispositive provision language of the CDC trust. And it is this italicized text is directly language from the agreement. As you can see, it is pretty broad, as long as those funds are used to, further growth and development in our community. So the rest of this is really, I just threw in there in case you wanted to go back to them during discussion. So these are our reserve balances as of the end of FY19. So you see that 343,000 balance that we are carrying. This is our past tax rate history over the last 6 years, so you can see where we've been as a community as we continue to prioritize affordability. Obviously, FY20 was the big increase with funding set aside for Main Street and the pool capital expenditures. And then the next steps for you all are discussion today and direction to us in advance of next week. Final votes that will be required of you are to approve the general fund budget and the warning for town meeting day. You will need to approve the individual enterprise and special revenue funds, and then approve the related rate resolutions and fee ordinance chapter updates. Anything significant I have missed? So that's the high-level overview, and have at it. And just for the public who may be watching, this presentation is linked off of our council agenda for tonight, but if you go to our website and go to the city budgets page, the complete proposed budget is linked directly there, so you can see all of that material there as well.
Thank you. Are there any sections of this that anyone needed to want us to chat more about or have questions about in this presentation? Or do we want to jump to you know, how we're feeling about what the current budget contains and how we might be inclined to, what we would like to be voting on next week.
I don't necessarily feel the need to go back and review any particular slides, except that I did just want to talk about the reserve balances on the, I just wanted to have a discussion on that particular piece, on the amount that's being maintained in water, wastewater, and streets, on-street reserves. Just kind of a curiosity. I was looking back for the comparison over time, but just curious how that's trending. So I see you have, what, 1.4 million held in water pollution and on-street and unassigned operating. So I'm just kind of curious what the desired level is. That track with previous years? That's a question that had come up for me as I was reading through this.
So in water and wastewater, we have been spending down annually the unassigned. When you do a deficit budget, that's where the deficit is pulling from. It's how we're covering that shortfall. On-street meters, that is actually growing. The expenses that we have to run the meters on the street versus the revenues we take in, they're not comparative. We are booking money aside, but that's going to pay for future parking, is the intent.
So just to say a little more about that, so the intent is to use some of that to buy down the debt for the Abenaki garage.
And I think that, that we've been spending down those reserves in water, wastewater is related to our discussion about the rates not being high enough to meet the needs of our ongoing capital costs.
So thank you for putting together the slides with the spreadsheet. I know that was a lot of extra work. I think just for my fellow council members, the reason I was interested in seeing this is because I wasn't sure how everyone else was feeling about budget items, and if we were going to kind of take it line by line, I thought it would be really helpful to have the full picture of what we're spending money on and what the net impact would be if we did want to get the rate lower. I think looking at, this slide and the next one, it is, a pretty lean budget. It's not like there are a lot of extraneous expenses in here. The only expense that I was really questioning was the finance tool, if we did want to invest the $10,000 for that this year or not. That being said, if we excluded it, it would not significantly lower the tax rate. So I think that's just kind of a value discussion that we can have if we think it's worth it or not.
Could you we talked about this and I cannot remember why we are trying to set aside this money when we don't actually know if we have to move.
So there's two reasons, and I'll let Angela talk about the second. So we anticipate, the property valuation at the Department of Taxes has gone out to bid for a new, what they call a CAMA system, which is the keeper of the statewide education grand list. It has been NEMRIC for the last 20 years, and we use because of that, in part, we use NEMRIC for all of our finance and data tracking. There is I think, significant possibility that the PVR goes with somebody not NEMRIC, which means we will need to confront the question of, do we switch to another system for everything? NEMRIC is a New England homegrown system. It's fairly dated. We know how to use it well, so it's very operational for us, but it doesn't let us do a lot of the analysis that we would like. So there would be some service improvements with a new system. Going to a new system will be much more costly than we are currently paying. However, since we actually built this budget, we also received notice from NEMRIC that the annual costs are going from a little to half of this expenditure next year. And that's where I'm going to turn it over to Angela and let her finish answering that question.
That's about all of the information that we received in a letter stating that the annual cost for NEMRIC would be $5,000 a year effective with FY21. And that is in addition to the fees that we pay now for the disaster recovery and the backups.
So is it about $5,000 new dollars, or it's
Yeah,
about
I think it's
4,000?
probably about $4,000 new dollars.
So an option for you, if you are looking to cut back a little, would be to reduce this by $4,000 to what we will actually pay for NEMRIC in FY21, but not be building up those reserves for future system, for a potential unknown future system.
Yeah, I think what I had thought about this before is, I guess that's the question, is do we need to be building that money towards reserves, or do we use existing reserves when it becomes a need?
So if we do get a new finance system, it's not just a one-time cost. There would likely be an annual software service cost. I've spoken with a couple of finance officers that use systems other than NEMRIC, and they've seen costs between $10,000 and $20,000 a year for their software. So this would be something that, in addition to the implementation year, we would then have to build into the next year's budget.
And when are they supposed to make this decision on if they're changing?
We originally heard October, and now we are being told the end of January.
Like this January?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
originally October, as of a couple months ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very significant decision for the state. It would be a huge move for the tax department to move on to a new system, and they have very strict procurement policies that they follow. So I think that my understanding is that they are in negotiation with a vendor, and they're not going to announce who that vendor is until they have a negotiated agreement. And I don't know.
So my one hesitation about like putting this in now and building up reserves is if that doesn't, the vendor doesn't change, the cost doesn't actually change, we end up sticking with NEMRIC, or the state rather does. What happens to that money? Like it's already baked into the budget unnecessarily at that point.
Well, it sounds like we have to build in at least another 4,000 or 5,000 this year, right? So it would be an extra 5 in there for years to come.
Basically, that number would move on to this spreadsheet where we see professional services altering. So that number does go up and down in a year as, salt's cheaper, mark's expensive, or, we anticipate different things. I actually don't know if salt's in that professional services line.
That's like state communications, the insurance.
So basically, to answer your question, it would show up in a line like that in the future if we reduce that expenditure line. But it's a valid point, and that's a value question for you all of, do you want to build that capacity now before we know what we're building for, or do we want to wait and know what the actual cost would be in a future year and have potentially a bigger increase in a future year? There's no right answer to that. It's whatever you guys would like to do.
I got a question that's kind of, the local tax option, is that put in this budget at all anywhere?
So local option tax is actually what makes up most of that last growth in revenues line.
Okay. Because that's kind of conservative, isn't it? Weren't we projecting that to be a lot more?
So that's the increase.
That's the increase. Okay, I get you now.
I guess I would look at the next, or the 2 slides from now, what's not included in this proposal in terms of things that we're choosing not to address, such as our JAG funding, inability to access that, and potential regional dispatch funding. So those things could be things that will also come up in the next year. So I don't see that there's I think if we are building up towards continuing to invest in our needed infrastructure, both software infrastructure and equipment to do the work that needs to be done in the city, I feel like there are other outlets for that. If we find out in 2 weeks that we can stick with NEMRIC and we have $5,000 extra, it's not, I wouldn't feel bad about reprogramming that towards reserve for this regional dispatch funding or other replacement of JAG funding. So I think there's some fallbacks that would be really worthwhile investments as well. It's kind of hard to see these not being included. So to me, saving 1/10 of a cent on the tax rate for when we have other needs and we probably will have to make this increased investment in some way or another soon. Doesn't seem that painful. I certainly want to keep it at 6 so that we could be paying NIMRIC and, or sorry,
Right.
5.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be taking that out entirely. It's really whether it goes down from 10 to 6.
I think that's a good point.
I mean, if we had to cut stuff, I mean, what are people comfortable cutting? Are we comfortable cutting the 8 hours of HR staff, or the 8 hours per week additional fire per diem? I mean, those are the kind of things that we aren't in our budget, and these are all new and additional. But if they start adding up, we can kind of make a dent into lowering the tax rate. But it's
So yes, that is an option. I would also say that's not necessarily my goal. I think what we are presented with here, 2.45%, given that, 1.55 to the pool, and so it's less than 1% for level service and these ads, I think is it's palatable to me. And I think a lot of these are smart investments. Increasing that HR position. I think first of all, just because most positions are 40 hours, but also should we win that grant to work towards community liaisons, having more capacity in that role makes sense.
because I was looking at the pool operations too, and I'm trying to figure out that number. I'm afraid if we discuss that pool operation cost, because we don't really know where that pool operation cost is coming from. It's brand new. So is that a conservative number? I mean, because that's where I was going next, by cutting down to just try to get the tax rate down. Because last year's tax rate increase was, quite a bit bigger than the previous year, and then it's increasing again this year. I mean, it's
Yeah,
trying to be,
sorry, go ahead, Mike.
trying to be tax friendly to our residents is what I was looking at it, and it looks great, the proposal. I think you guys did a great job, but the tough questions might come where we need to start cutting.
But, the public also did pass some really big projects, and that's part of why the
Correct.
budget is so big, right? The pool, Main Street.
And a historically lower percentage increases prior to last year. I think, as have been said before, that was in stage setting for the increases needed last year and this year. And I guess I always feel that the pool operations, there still is money being paid by taxpayers for pool operations that got reprogrammed to other infrastructure projects. So we never gave money back to taxpayers when the pool closed. And we just have been using that for other sources. And so, yes, we now have to add a whole bunch of new money for the pool, but that's because there was never a forced decision to increase investment in infrastructure at a prior council meeting in this time of year. So, yes, there's this increase in the pool operations costs, but some of that would have been, if the pool had been open this entire time, some of that 115 would be operations that were going towards the pool that weren't going towards infrastructure. So we've been able to basically put off tax increase for infrastructure spending that we now have to make up in pool operations. I also would say it'd be good this year to make a splash with the pool to really go. Thank you. I was just going to be silent. But I do think that there's a value to going big this year, and if we need to scale back and pull those operations back because we didn't get the community engagement that pool needs to operate at that level, that's a decision for next year. I guess I would hate to see us try and roll out quietly and small on pool operations and then almost have a self-fulfilling prophecy of not getting community engagement.
Agreed.
So that's, it's a gamble, but I think in this case, I think with the amount of money that the community's already invested in building the thing, that we should try it out for a year at operations we think could be used.
I'd like just to say a reminder too, the pool operations cost in the past has not been quite to this scale either, because a lot of it was volunteers helping to keep the pool running as well. I mean, the budget in the past years was, I think, $50,000, right?
50 to 60,000. Yeah.
So a lot of that, plus the community members of this community, like some of the pillars, kept the pool running by donating their time to work on it. So this obviously ain't gonna happen because it's under warranty, so to speak. But
I tend to agree with that position of coming out strong. What I would want to make sure that we do in the next year potentially is be accountable to visiting that data, like seeing if this staffing level makes sense or these hours. And if it is too much, reducing what is allocated to pool operations and using that to mitigate other cost increases potentially. But I think I am comfortable starting strong and having that be a definite bump in the tax rate that also aligns to votes that voters have taken, knowing that there would be increasing costs to them to have this facility. I am also concerned about ever escalating tax rates, but this number is a lot lower than I thought it would be, and it's lower than what had been projected in the previous discussions when Main Street and the pool were on the table. And I think that we can, my long-term vision would be that we continue to shoot for, kind of keeping consistently lower increases like this and not having to do another 6% or something like that.
Right. And I don't want to cut stuff either, especially when it comes to public safety. I see Chief Audio over there stewing. But I think it's a good budget. It looks like it could work. I just hope the public agrees with us.
Yeah, and I think too, any of these items are, outside of that significant increase in supporting the pool launching, these other items are very small, and align to strategic vision areas and things that we have discussed as priorities. It doesn't feel like it would make an impact to remove any of, the financial savings would not be there to reduce the service.
Like by $50,000, yeah. I mean, that's where I was coming up with the problem, but if cuts need to be cut, we need to start figuring out where, but maybe we won't have to.
I am mindful that there are small amounts add up over time. But I don't know, I feel like even if we removed all of these ads, besides the pool, the reduction would be so small on what this is actually adding to a tax bill. I think the city has been improving services to residents over time. And I think particularly in the last few years, with commitments to some of these very large projects that we've undertaken, being able to actually carry that out in a successful way for people is important.
And kudos for having the audit meeting on the budget meeting day.
That actually was pretty.
That was actually not intentional. Note to self for the future.
I got a quick question about East Allen Street. Is that considered TIF district, that apartment house that's being built too? Does that impact the TIF?
No, the TIF border is the rail tracks there.
Anything beyond the railroad tracks on East Allen is groundless growth to the general fund.
Oh, I thought the new building was going across the street from VSAC on the kitty corner.
I'm sorry.
The East Allen, the 23, 24, if that apartment building gets built.
So 223 East Allen, the mixed income housing development,
Yes.
is across from Cassavant. So right now, Cassavant just opened up the hill on East Allen, and City Lofts is currently under construction. And 223 is directly across Manso from City Lofts. So it's not in the TIF district, it's above the rail. If the if something happens at the Redstone property where the two white buildings are on East Allen, that is in the TIF district.
That is, now,
Then that's across from PC.
okay, I guess I was confused. I thought those houses across the street from that was the area that they were talking about putting a building.
So they are talking about putting a hotel there.
Not where the two houses are. I'm talking the opposite, going towards Essex, whatever. Go across the corner from VSAC. There's 2 or 3 houses when you come out of
Cascade Way.
Cascade Way.
Yeah.
Aren't those isn't that a potential project zone right there?
So the two, kind of, Eric, help me on the map here. As you're coming out of Cascade Way there on that corner, right
Yep.
to the left are 2 big white houses,
Right,
and that's where the hotel is proposed.
correct. I'm talking about on the right-hand side going up.
Are you
So-
talking
East
about
down.
on the other side of
The
CCV?
Wagner parcel.
So if you keep going up and you hit,
No. Way before that. You know where VSAC building is?
Mhm.
Sorry, I didn't do this. VSAC building, across the corner, there's 3 houses right there.
like where Gamache
What are
has
you
its
driving
office?
at, though? How is this related to
I'm
our
just
budget
wondering,
discussion?
'cause I
That
thought
is in the
that's-
TIF
I
district.
thought there was a zoning project going there. No? Am I wrong? Did I hear that wrong? Okay, I was wondering if that was part of the TIF, if they're building another building there and ripping those houses down.
So technically, yes, that would
Okay.
be in the TIF. We
I-
don't
I-
have any zoning permits.
No, and
for
I thought there was,
that
so,
house,
okay.
Those houses.
I'll just say, to me, this budget reflects carrying forward existing commitments that we have made as a community. There are no large ads here. We're not asking to do anything big and new. We're not looking at any bond votes for residents this year. For me, this does align to the kind of the trajectory we've been discussing.
I would agree, and I think it also aligns with I was just pulling up our master plan again to see if we're kind of hitting all of our notes, and I do think that this continues to make investments in our things that we say we value in terms of community risk reduction. I think that's great to see those public safety elements in there. We have some small natural resources investments, which is good for us in the city with few endowments in that area. I think we're investing in our technical and built infrastructure and maintaining those, and I think that we're being proactive on the pool maintenance piece and kind of protecting the investment that the community's made. So I think it's hitting on a lot of notes that we are doing. For a 2.45% increase is a very modest increase, and any of us who do budgeting for programs assume 3%. At least I do. When we do budgeting, we assume 3% growth in salaries and benefits, and we're under that. So I think it's commendable that we're able to do the same things, add some new operations, invest in strategic areas, all for less than what we might forecast for budget increases.
That's a great statement, and you know what, you should remember that when we have the public hearing. No, I'm serious, because some people just don't understand. They see increase, and they're like, and I hear it a lot when I'm out talking to my friends or residents. They're like, they're taxing us to death, but not, everything, progress means growth, and it costs money. So I think you should remember that statement and rephrase that, or not rephrase it, restate it.
Write it down for me.
I'll watch the coverage.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I do commend the city and each of the department heads for putting this together, so thank you.
I mean, next week we are voting. There won't be a chance to ask them for any more information.
I thought there was public hearing.
Yeah, there's a public hearing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we will no longer be,
Yeah.
modifying. So this would be last call for,
Mhm.
That's fine with me. I feel good about what's presented, and I appreciate the extra explanation about the NEMRIC system. I'm fine with leaving the 10,000 in there, knowing that we have that increase of at least 5 this year anyway. So I don't have any further questions about it.
there's no public comment. Well, thank you. Thank you for presenting the same information to us again in a new way.
Well, I also want to thank Amy for the idea of this spreadsheet. It is a variation on something that Deke used to use a lot, and I think it is improved in this way. And so thank you for the guidance on that. We will use it in the future.
Thank you for doing it for my brain. That's very visual in that way, so appreciate it.
There was definitely a phone call where I was like, Amy, what do you want?
I
Help me, help me.
So, shall we move on then to item D? Related discussion about resolution for FY21 water rates, which Angela will stay up here for, and John will be joining us.
Were you guys able to open that?
Tries to open as a Word document for me.
Yeah, it won't let me open it on this computer.
So,
Thank you.
we're putting these before you just again one more time for discussion because you will need to approve them in the future. And the budget that you will need to approve on next Monday is directly tied to these rate increases. So we just want to make sure you saw them one more time. John, you want to give a high-level overview starting with the water rates?
Sure. So as we discussed during the water fund presentation, we're proposing to increase the water rates by 2.5%. So that would go from $39.64 per 1,000 cubic feet to $40.63 per 1,000 cubic feet. To put that in kind of more realistic terms, that basically means for, you know, 3-bedroom house that has, you know, 90 gallons per day per person, that's a $13 increase for the year. So $3 per quarter you would see on a water, on your water bill. And as discussed, one of the main drivers for this is that we are subsidizing the water funds, the capital projects. So we're trying to get to sort of a sustainable budget where the revenue on the water side pays for the debt. So right now for FY20, we're projecting to use $85,000 with this out of the water fund reserves with this increase.
So, as a reminder, this also ties into the budget that we are looking at, and a plan of escalating the rate incrementally over the coming years to catch us up and keep us ahead. And we are in this proposed rate of 40.63. I think the regional average was 40.50 the last time we looked at those numbers.
Yeah, I don't remember where we are regionally. We're about middle of the pack based on the latest Champlain Water District study that came out recently.
So this is putting us at average essentially with the area. So we're gonna have to, every year we have to do these resolutions to set the rates. We are just, it's on for discussion tonight, we would actually be approving at a future meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And when is the public hearing aspect of it? Or did that already happen? It says something in the resolution about a duly warned public hearing.
So that was a previous public hearing that was held to approve the fees chapter of the ordinance, where in the ordinance it says that the water and wastewater rates will be set by resolution.
Oh, okay, so we don't have to do that part. Oh.
Are there any questions about this?
Yeah, because historically the water rate hasn't gone up. Then it went up a little bit, and right.
Yeah, last year was the first sort of increase since I think 2012,
Right.
and it was, as you said, it was pretty jagged, like 3%,
Right.
20% when those increases were. So we're trying to be consistent. And
That's my next statement. I think that if we do a steady increase, it'd be a lot better than having to jag up again.
We good with this topic?
Yes.
Thank you.
So item E is the same thing, it's a resolution for the wastewater rates.
So similar to the water fund, this increase is 4%, a little bit higher because of the debt on the sewer fund side, and just trying to catch up to our current debt needs. So we're proposing rate increase from $50.03 per 1,000 cubic feet to $52.03 per 1,000 cubic feet. Based on that same 90 gallon per day household, that equates to about $26 annually. And so that means about a $6.50 per quarter increase on your sewer bill side. And we'll say that those numbers are pretty conservative for a 3-bedroom house.
Say 90 gallons a day, isn't that a lot?
Yeah, and we're just trying to be conservative. I mean,
Okay.
typically, so that equates to 270 gallons per day. In reality, it's probably more like 180 gallons per day. So just to, again, be conservative.
Yeah, the AWWA estimates average use per person is 60 gallons per person per day. So we're overestimating compared to water standards.
Yep.
And this one is one where we're still significantly below. So with this at 52.03, in 2018, the average rate was $60.97. So we're still significantly
So we're still on a steady rate, right?
So I was looking sort of big picture with the budgets and these 2 rate increases and these like average impacts for the average household. And, with the $62 increase for the taxes, plus I think you just said 13 for water, per household 26, it's about $100 more a year for our average resident. Just to put things into perspective. Average though, all right, because we have everyone's tax bills vary widely and water usage and things like that. It is for me a little bit, it is nice to see that while the actual like percent increase for wastewater is higher, that we're still under average when thinking about affordability. Any other questions about this resolution process or these rates? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
So item F is a discussion item, a goal update for safe, healthy, connected people.
So everybody is here. I will
Great.
tell you that, in keeping with our reporting schedule, we wanted to be sure you saw this and we provided the update. You have just spent a lot of time with these department heads and heard about their activities, so we are happy to walk through things or answer questions, or they are happy to walk through things or answer questions, whatever you would like.
Yeah, I feel like reading this memo was a nice recap of what I learned during the budget process.
It was pretty easy to write this time.
Did any of you have was there anything more you wanted to hear about, or you just want to jump to questions?
Chief Hebert, the K-9 program, is there any progress report on that?
Yeah, I believe at the last update, we had said that we had decided as a leadership team downstairs at the police department with a completely new leadership team from the lieutenants down, that we wanted to spend the time and energy focusing on the management team for this year, which we didn't feel the added cost of adding the K-9 program and having somebody go on to training for an extended period of time for that was something that we could manage along with the management team being gone to extended trainings too. So we decided to just put that off and possibly readdress it next year.
Okay. It's the only thing I see red, and I don't like to see the color red.
Yeah.
I think that was, can't remember if we're not distinguishing them this year, but one of the things that you guys introduced at the policy setting session last year, which I think was a very good addition. I think, Jim, you suggested this was the category of things that would move forward pending resources. And I think this fell into that category. And so we are reflecting it as red because we are not doing it, but it is for the resource question.
I personally did not have any new questions since last week's presentation arise.
I was curious about the Library of Things and what the kind of utilization and kind of status of that effort is.
Yep.
Just kind of
So that is now with our office hours open in the community services space. So we are, for spatial constraints in the actual library footprint, storing the stuff, the things in our office. So pretty small collection to start. We have some board games, some card games, blood pressure monitors, some garden tools, a shovel, just some real basics. But we are working right now with Paul to put out a kind of formal call to action to the community to say, what do you all want to see us add to this this mix? And we'll start to use that information to kind of slowly build that collection up over time, similar to the way we build a collection of books in the library. So it's definitely in its infancy, but we're pretty excited about it. Certainly if you hear from folks in the community or have suggestions yourselves, let us know. Space is a little bit limiting, so probably a lawn tractor is not on the short list, but I think we are trying to figure out what do people want to be able to access periodically and not have to own, and try to be accommodating to that. And you can actually, on the library's online catalog, search the Library of Things. If you go into the catalog and type that in, you can see currently what's available. So,
Cool.
yeah. We're also very interested in a new name. If you have any creative thoughts over there, and marketing, looking at the marketing person desk, I think it's kind of an industry term, but we don't love it. So we're open to suggestions there, but it is live.
Next, another.
Yeah,
No, we can't.
you get one.
So, well spent, well spent. No, we've been hearing a lot from seniors about transportation options to especially grocery stores and other events. I'm just curious, you mentioned there was a kind of brief mention on the GMTA partnership. Just curious what, if any, kind of changes you might see in the future that would support, especially our seniors getting around to area stores?
It's a hard one to answer in terms of reading those tea leaves looking forward. I think that there's been a lot of work regionally with Green Mountain Transit, United Way, and CCRPC to look at, in particular, the elderly and disabled transportation program, which we have a very small budget for here in Winooski, but there are a lot of other regional players and communities that are part of that. So that's an area where I think both United Way and RPC are kind of stepping in from an objective perspective to say, let's really take a look at this program and make sure it's running as efficiently as possible. GMT's been a great partner at that table. They've been very much willing to be flexible and creative, but those conversations are still pretty early. That's only been not even a year that kind of constellation of partners has been around the table. For a long time, Green Mountain Transit kind of ran that just as an independent grant that was passed through. So I think there was not a lot of incentive necessarily for them to do things differently because the grant worked. Partners seemed happy enough, but I think on the ground we're starting to see more and more there's a need for enhanced services. So in Winooski, our small budget means that we have very limited parameters for what folks can access those rides for, whereas some of our other partners who have more money in that program have more flexibility to take them to social engagements and meals and grocery shopping. Ours is very much focused around medical need because of the small budget. So that's an area where I do think some change could be afoot in the future. And then I mentioned in here too, we've got an intern this semester from Champlain who's doing some work. She actually interned last semester at the senior center and is pivoting into a capstone project around senior transportation. So that, I'm curious, she just literally started today. I left her down there at 5 o'clock and came up here. But I think starting to look at the transportation master plan, GMT's planning documents, certainly a lot of work on the ground with the seniors and starting to see where those pieces come together and locally what we can do. Certainly our van is busy. It's out pretty much every day of the week with housing authority drivers at this point, but we know there's more need there.
Yeah, I think I was hearing the same thing Jim was, that there's a morning crew of people that like to go in the morning, but there's also not the morning crew people that like to be in the later afternoon.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's your challenge to figure out time zones for the early risers and not so early risers.
Finding drivers has been challenging. We've had for a while now volunteer opportunity out. looking for volunteer drivers. You know, we have the vehicle and would be happy to put it into play at different times of the day if it's available. But finding a reliable driver has been the challenge for us. We've been lucky with SASH through the Housing Authority that they've been able to put some staff at it and some volunteers at it, but putting that call out to the community hasn't been fruitful yet. So, way open to suggestions, but yeah, it's an area we know we need to do better with, so.
Also, we were talking about getting to the ballots to vote, because for some reason they'd rather go to the ballot house to vote, and they also expressed that concern about how do we get there. Some just want to be there engaged in the process. The other ones, they didn't really say much about the absentee ballots when we had that meeting. But that's another thing to think about too, so when we have community events. Make sure we don't forget about the people that can't necessarily walk there.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Task one
You
more.
look like you're ready
Yeah,
now.
no, you see a smile.
Sorry. So the final one, I mean, we kind of have not done anything on the JAG funding, and you mentioned the review has been completed. We're now in compliance with the state fair and impartial policing policy. Options going forward, they've kind of marked this green and done, we're going somewhere, but what other options do we have for this issue?
Well, I think the obvious option would be to adopt the state model policy, or a conversation around the state model policy. Montpelier recently adopted the state policy and added a reporting requirement to the council annually, which I think is a really workable solution. I think we need to talk to the groups that would be concerned about a change in the fair and impartial policing policy before we would even consider making that decision. And then the other option is that we just don't pursue the funding and we don't replace the funding. Mm-hmm. It's $10,000. It's not the end of the world as far as you know, a funding stream, but I have been able to start some programs, the motorcycle program. We've replaced equipment. I was hoping to put in-car video cameras back into the cars, which we haven't had in 5 years since the last system failed. There's things that we could use the money for that would make us a better, stronger, more transparent police department. But I also understand that the fair and impartial policing policy was a value statement for our community, so I'm okay with all of the options.
Thanks, Chief.
The town of Norwich is going through that right now,
There are many going through it.
and it'd be interesting to see what some of these other communities are doing, just for an example. Just to follow, I mean, we could follow suit too.
I do want to remind people too that neither the DOJ, they never found us out of compliance. Jesse and I had discussed it when Bob De Palma reviewed it and brought up his concerns, and that's where it stopped. So we don't even know for sure if the feds would say that it's out of compliance. We just didn't want to go there at the time. We didn't feel the need.
Just
Well-
apply anyway, maybe.
So there is a nuance here in that we are an allocated JAG community, so we automatically get funding based on our demographics. To access that funding, so we still are receiving JAG money, they're still allocating money to us. To access that funding, to be able to pull it down from the federal government, we have to certify that we are in compliance with these federal regulations. And the certification form changed from 18 to 19. And it has to be signed by our city attorney, and our city attorney couldn't certify that we are in compliance because we are clearly by our policy not complying with a very specific statute within federal government. So it's not that, so we could ask them if we are in compliance, but that would essentially be negating our legal advice. You know what,
Right.
is that, that's pretty wonky, but.
Mm.
So is the review done, or would we expect to hear more on this in the coming months as other communities go through this? Montpelier's got a new policy. Is this something that we could get an update on at some future date?
So right now, we're in the process that the chief outlined of meeting with those key stakeholders, and then anticipate bringing you back something.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
0.
You're up.
-2. That's what I'm at.
If there are no further questions, then thank you for returning again so rapidly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
So we are on to item G. This is on for approval. This is certification of TIF annual report to Vermont Economic Progress Council, and Angela joins us again.
We covered a lot of this already.
You did. This is actually the report for the TIF district for FY19. The first few pages are the financial information that duplicates what's been presented in the audit and was audited by RHR Smith. The remaining pages are more qualitative data that has been gathered by Heather regarding affordable units created, job creation, things that the Vermont Economic Progress Council is looking for us to report on to measure the success of our district. We do this report annually, and it requires certification that we've presented it to you, that you're aware of what's going on in the TIF districts before they'll finalize our report.
And one thing, just anticipating a question on the actual report document, it says reports are due before January 15th. This is to let you know that Angela and Heather actually submitted it very early in January. I think we were the first ones in. BEPC has approved this, has reviewed this report and finds that it's in compliance, and now you also need to certify that you've reviewed it. So the January 15th deadline is for us, not for you.
Now,
I had that question, like,
the deadline, so once they've reviewed it after the January 15th deadline, there's a secondary deadline to have it reviewed by your council of February 15th.
okay.
So there was some interesting data in here. You know, I saw in there downtown business growth of 5%, which stood out to me. Like, we've seen new businesses come here, but, you know, we still have the, those 2 empty spaces, and people tend to have an impression that there is a lot of unused space, but actually we are pretty full up. I did see a note in here, and I unfortunately did not note for myself what page this is on, but it was the gross receipts for the downtown. Said that those decreased by 23%, I think. So I was wondering if you could, like, explain that item number 8 to us.
Heather,
Or
would you like to join?
Yeah, it's just using the state tax reporting. So I couldn't explain it when I saw it. I was like, well, that's very interesting. So I look at sales tax and meals room and rooms and alcohol tax. So those are just reports that are provided at the state level, and I don't have an easy explanation for that.
Okay.
And I spent a little time thinking to myself, why is that? Why did that happen? But it wasn't the biggest change among municipalities, but it also wasn't a consistent change among municipalities, because I looked across towns as well to see if, you know, was there a consistent drop? But, so I don't have an easy answer.
Okay.
So, and that's the whole city, or that's just the TIF?
That's the whole city.
Okay.
That's the whole city. They don't
And-
break it out by TIF.
That makes sense.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
I think I'd missed that before.
Everyone sort of clear on what's in here and can certify that they did review it?
Yes.
I had one more question. On the very last page, it says total amount of work performed. Do we pay $148,000 to have this audit done?
No. The $148,000 paid to Vermont firms was our legal costs for FY19 for the lawsuit.
Your lawsuit.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh, wait,
they
I
have
see
us,
that
yeah,
now,
it
yes.
crosses pages. They have us state how many Vermont-based businesses we pay and how much we paid them. Our only Vermont-based businesses are law firms.
Thank you for clarifying. Any other questions on this? So I would entertain a motion to approve certification of TIF annual report to Vermont Economic Progress Council.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Chair should sign the certification letter. I do need you to sign with Ted as the secondary verifier.
This brings us to the end of our agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Amy, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Don't be signed.
Yeah. These ones are signed.